Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Friday, April 7th, 2023. There's a lot of things to talk about this evening, and if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I give you, you can go to weather.gov, and that is the National Weather Service's online presence. You point and click anywhere on this map of the continental U.S. or Hawaii and Alaska in the lower left. It'll bring up a forecast with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories, and a quick check of what's going on in the lower 48 this Friday afternoon. We have red flag warnings, not just for areas of the central plains, but out here in the northeast parts of Connecticut, down around areas of southern New England, where dry and breezy conditions are contributing to high fire danger. We also have flash flood watches across the lower Mississippi Valley there, including southern Louisiana. Aerial outlooks here for flooding, for snowmelt flooding that could occur here in the coming weeks, and then back out here northeast portions of Nevada, flood watches for the potential for some snowmelt flooding that could occur with warmer temperatures that they're anticipating here later this weekend and into early next week. Here in Alaska, we're going to see periods of snow across the central and eastern interior later tonight through at least early Monday morning, and some of the snowfall amounts could add up over a couple of day period. I'll talk more about that. A gale force low pressure system will be coming on through the Gulf and then actually backing up to the north and west and bringing precipitation and some breezy conditions to the panhandle, especially as we go through tonight and into Sunday. And this could cause some accumulating snow as that moisture backs up into Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage Bowl, Matanuska Valleys could pick up some light accumulations of snow here coming up as we go through late tonight and especially on Sunday. But overall, below normal temperatures are going to continue across much of the mainland through mid-April. Quick check of what's going on up in the northwest portion of the state. Selawik down to 33 below zero this morning. Temperature as of early afternoon, 9 below with mostly clear skies. Further east, Fort Yukon clear, 25 degrees, and this area here through Fort Yukon will be picking up some light snow as we go through Sunday and especially Sunday night. Further south, we have Whittier and mostly cloudy skies, a temperature at 29 degrees, and some of that moisture is going to be pulling back into the Whittier area as we go through late tonight and especially tomorrow, so you could see some accumulating light snow. And then down toward Heidelberg in the southern panhandle, we're seeing overcast skies and some sprinkles, but more substantial showers and rain will be moving up through there as we go through this Saturday night and on Sunday. So we have a winter weather advisory for some blowing snow along the eastern Arctic coast around Kaktovik and the Barter Island. And that area here, the winds will be coming down. That's in effect until midnight this Saturday night. This broad area of blue is a special weather statement for periods of snow. Generally 1 to 4 inches of snow is expected in this area late tonight through early Monday morning. But in an area from around Northway through Chicken on up back toward Central and then Adigan Pass, as much as 4 to 8 inches of snow could fall, especially along the areas of hills and mountains facing some upslope winds that could enhance some of the snowfall there. And then down here along areas of the Matanuska Valley and Anchorage Bowl and in through the Kenai Peninsula, we could be looking at some accumulating snow, 2 to 4 inches as we go through very late tonight and during the day on Sunday. A few areas could see a little more snow than that, especially along, say, eastern Anchorage hillside area and other places around the Chugach Mountains. But here on the satellite imagery this afternoon, you can see here's that low pressure circulation in the North Pacific that's going to lift up into the Gulf and then pull back to the north and west tomorrow afternoon and evening. Further north, we have a trough up here, enhanced cloudiness, light snow along the Beaufort Sea coast, along the Arctic coast, and then behind me there is a frontal system approaching the far western portion of the Aleutians, including Shimia. But that system is still ways off. But for what's going to be the main weather producer of note will be this low over the Gulf that's going to come back up here off of the Panhandle coast early Sunday and then pull back toward the north and west and be located over the western Gulf by early Sunday evening. We're also going to have some moisture that's back up here through areas of the central and eastern interior, and that's what's going to bring the snow to the areas I described here just a little earlier. So on the weather map, there's the low this afternoon, 971 low that's going to be lifting northeastward and then pulling back to the north and west. We have a couple of disturbances back up here through northwest Canada, and then along the Arctic coast, the winds that have been gusty there around Kaktovik will be coming down later this evening and overnight. And then as we go into late tonight, early Sunday morning, there comes that low lifting a little further northward, and then by Saturday, we expect that low to be still located there just to the lower central Gulf area, and then by the time we get into Sunday, that low is going to pull back toward the just off the Kenai coast there in the western Gulf, and behind me we'll have a frontal system that is working its way eastward, weakening a bit, but it will have a band of some snow, mixed precipitation. Rain should not be too terribly heavy or strong, not like a couple of the few systems we've seen here over the past month or so. And then the interior, as we go through Saturday night especially, we'll see that snow expand and continue into the day on Sunday into early Monday, and a weak low up there in the Chukchi Sea, providing a few snow showers there along areas of the Chukchi Sea coast through the Bering Strait. And by Sunday afternoon, and that initial low pulls back toward the western Gulf, while little secondary lows just sitting there west of Haida Gwaii and off the Panhandle coast. The front behind me, that feature just kind of works its way a little further eastward, but it will have a tendency to at least weaken a bit by the time we get into early next week. Temperatures generally above freezing, southern Panhandle near freezing and a bit below there. Pretty cold temperatures as we get up toward the Copper River Basin, down near 10 above, 7 below at McGrath. There's some very cold air across the northwest. I'll show you in a moment. High temperatures will be in the 40s across much of the Panhandle on Saturday afternoon with rain. And then back to the west, we see temperatures still below freezing around Anchorage, but back up in the mid-30s along the northwestern Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. Sunday morning lows generally a couple few degrees above freezing in the Panhandle. Still cold along and west of the Alaska Range. Temperatures in many areas to the north and west below zero. And then Sunday afternoon, we expect temperatures to be in the at least 40s here across the Panhandle, and temperatures stay on the cooler side, western Kenai up through the Anchorage Bowl and Talkeetna, staying just below freezing with some periods of snow. Now, these are where the cold temperatures are happening. Very cold pocket of air over the northwest, lower Chukchi Sea. It's going to kind of rotate down across the Seward Peninsula and then eventually modifies it, pushes toward the central interior early next week. Warmest temperatures will be along the Alcan border, where we expect those periods of snow to be developing, especially as we get into Saturday night and Sunday. Back here to the west, daytime highs single digits above and below zero, and then nighttime lows, some of the normally cold spots could be in the 20s to even near 30 below once again come Sunday morning. And then Sunday afternoon highs here along the Alcan border, 20s, maybe in an isolated 30, but still single digits below zero, northwest Arctic coast down toward Kotzebue, and then along areas of the southwest interior as you go up the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, below zero tonight, quite cold, and temperatures even near or below freezing there in the eastern Aleutians. Saturday afternoon highs single digits above zero through the southwest interior, getting back up a bit above freezing in through the eastern Aleutians, and then back up in the lower 40s there as you get especially from Adak westward. And then for Sunday morning low, still number of temperatures here west of the Alaska Range below zero, with afternoon highs maybe getting back up into the teens in some areas, and readings will recover a bit back up into the lower 40s, at least up through Dutch Harbor there through the eastern Aleutians. The temperature outlook for April is indicating temperatures going to average below normal for the month across the south, a little above normal in the northwest. That was issued about a week ago. Precipitation a bit below normal here in the southwest along the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and then maybe a little above normal in the northwest. This is what we're anticipating through mid-month. below to much below normal temperatures across much of the mainland, centered here through the southwest quadrant or so. And that trend is going to continue, as I said, through mid-April, with precipitation near normal across much of the mainland, but a bit above normal in the southeast interior, extending down through areas of the Panhandle. So those of you who are having the cold weather right now, it's going to stay around for a while.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's now time for your aviation weather, and if you have a flight planned either Saturday or Sunday over this weekend, main weather feature we're going to be watching is an area of low pressure that's located down in the lower Gulf. It's going to kind of pull back toward the northwest. In the meantime, Saturday morning, though, we expect MVFR conditions along areas of the Panhandle, a couple pockets of IFR here in through the east central interior, along and north of the Alaska Range, and then up along the northwest coast, and then way out in the far Aleutians. And into Saturday afternoon, we could see some IFR conditions along the central Alaska Range down in through the Talkeetna Mountains. Widespread MVFR conditions across the Panhandle, MVFR across much of the west, and then a broad belt of IFR conditions across the western half of the Aleutians associated with a frontal system in low pressure. As that front works its way eastward on Sunday, we expect the IFR conditions to expand in through the lower Bering Sea and across the central Aleutians. Sunday morning early, more extensive IFR conditions along the Alaska Range, Talkeetna Mountains into the areas up toward the 40-mile Gold Country, and then also pockets here along the intercoastal mountains, especially in the north there of the Panhandle. And by Sunday afternoon, more widespread IFR conditions are anticipated across much of the Panhandle. Also an area here across the east central interior, and then across much of the lower Bering Sea on through parts of the central, approaching the eastern Aleutians as that front works its way eastward. Past conditions on Saturday, MVFR is expected up there along the Brooks Range at Anaktuvuk, as well as Adigan passes. Further in south and west, Lake Clark should generally hold on to VFR conditions during the day on Saturday, though Merrill will see more in the way of MVFR conditions. And then as we round up through the central Alaska Range, MVFR at Rainy Pass, but we do expect IFR conditions to try to move in there and through Windy Pass, especially by Saturday midday and afternoon. And then further east, Isabel Pass, MVFR conditions, but west of there, just west of there, IFR should hold during the day on Saturday. Mentasta Pass should generally see MVFR conditions on Saturday, and then further south and east, Tanita Pass will become IFR as we go through the afternoon on Saturday, and further south and west, Portage Pass will generally just be seeing MVFR conditions. And also in the far northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will see MVFR conditions prevail during the day Saturday. Freezing levels at the surface run through the lower Bering, down south of the Alaska Peninsula, along the coastal areas of the Kodiak Island, up through the Kenai Peninsula, northern Gulf Coast, in through the inner channels of the Panhandle. And freezing levels behind me do bump up associated with that frontal system, 2, 4, 6, 8,000 feet aloft as that front works its way eastward across the western Aleutians. Greatest threat for icing will be with some moisture precipitation that's going to be pulling back to the north and west from the low that's in the lower Panhandle that'll track back toward the northwest. Could even bring some snow to areas of the Kenai all the way to the Anchorage Bowl later Saturday night and during the day on Sunday. Jet stream level winds, well, we have a low circulation here in the northwest portion of the state, weak low at 30,000 feet out over the lower Gulf, North Pacific, but more importantly, jet core over 150 knots, northwesterly wind flow there at 30,000 feet across the central Bering Sea. Bring it down to 700 millibars or 9,000 feet. We have the low circulation here just south of the Gulf with winds aloft anywhere from 45 to 60 knots, pulling in that moisture up toward Haida Gwaii, British Columbia coast, and the Panhandle. Behind me here, we have the weak low circulation in the northwest, and then that broad belt of mid-level winds there at 9,000 feet in excess of 50 to as high as 75 knots in through the western Aleutians. Bringing it down to 3,000 feet, we can see the low circulation up there up toward Point Hope, Point Lay area with winds out of the northwest across the Russian coastline. And then further west, we have winds 40 to 50 knots pushing through the western Aleutians. And then out here in the Gulf, there's that low circulation with winds coming up into areas, the outer coast of the Panhandle. This is where we would expect the potential to be some isolated severe turbulence, as the lower level winds around this system are fairly strong. And if we take a look at things here, turbulence outlook for Saturday indicates areas areas of severe turbulence possible, especially along the outer Panhandle coast into the southeastern Gulf surface to 5,000 feet. Back further west, we could see some moderate turbulence across areas, Shelikof Strait down along the Alaska Peninsula surface to 4,000 feet. And then finally, out in the far west here, some moderate turbulence out toward the western Aleutians around the surface to 3,000 feet.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. He is here and has been here many times to talk to us about weather satellites and how those can help Alaskans understand our weather, how we can do better detection, keep more people safe from things even like volcanic ash. But today, Eric, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about weather satellites and how that can keep Alaskans safe and protect our property from wildfire. Right?
That's right, Dave. Today's topic is where there's smoke, there's fire. And thanks for having us back again to Alaska
Anytime.
Weather. Well, weather satellites have a lot of different instruments on them. It turns out that the electromagnetic spectrum has a lot going on in it, and only one part of that is visible light, what we see.
Right.
Weather satellites, of course, report that. Today's topic is wildfires.
Okay.
There are some people who say that in Alaska in the summertime you don't have severe weather. These people are usually from Oklahoma or somewhere, and F5 tornadoes tend not to occur in Alaska.
Right.
People have also said what we do have in the summer. What is Alaska's severe summer weather can be hydrology,
right,
flash flood and erosion in the mountains and things like that, and fires, wildfires.
Absolutely.
Those were here in 2004, certainly remember that. We've got an example here from 2014. Now, it was a quiet season overall, but in May, down on the Kenai Peninsula, we had a wildfire on the Funny River, and this is a satellite image from a satellite, a polar orbiter that went right over Alaska, and we can see the plume of smoke coming out of that fire on the Kenai, curling down. It's caught in the wind.
Right.
It goes down toward Kodiak Island, curves around. You can see it circulating around a low pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was a beautiful picture.
Oh my gosh.
Except there was a fire.
There's a fire there. The nice thing is with this satellite image, you can tell where the fire origin is, where the smoke is coming from, and it's a color image. We're looking at the wavelength spectrum of about 0.4 to 0.7 micrometers or microns. That's what the human eye would see. If you were riding on the satellite and look down, you could see this kind of an image.
Right.
So that's pretty nice. But it turns out there's more to the electromagnetic spectrum than just visible light.
Okay.
You've heard of infrared, ultraviolet, that kind of thing. If we move into longer wavelengths, let's go to one specifically, 3.7 microns.
Okay, 3.7.
Why worry about that one?
Okay.
Well, we've got an example here. 3.7, it turns out, happens to be very sensitive to a certain temperature range, temperatures where fires burn.
Okay.
And so we've got an example zoomed in a little more from that same Funny River fire down on the Kenai Peninsula, and we can see that you get up into a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit, and that's where the colors are. We can see there on the Funny River fire to the west and to the east, almost a horseshoe shape there, is not only we're seeing where the fire is in a general sense, but specifically where it's the active fire.
That is where it's burning right now.
And it's 3.7 microns is the important temperature there.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is really important to firefighters on the ground, people that are making plans and directing the firefighters and where they need to go and cut the trenches and keep people safe.
You know it. If you want to fight that fire, you got to know where it is.
Okay.
You got to know the leading edge. We've also got a movie loop, nothing quite like animating it in time.
Yeah.
You can see the fire spreading out over time with a succession of film or a succession of images. Now, this is one channel, 3.7 micron. You know, we looked at that color smoke image before, and that's actually a red, a green, and a blue. That's how you get color imagery. What if you took 3 different wavelengths in the infrared? You went from like 2.2 micron, 1.5 micron, up to 3.7. You mix them together, you get this other kind of color image, which is even a better way to sharply bring out the details of where that leading edge of the fire is. Okay. You'll note, though, in the infrared, guess what? We don't see the smoke. That's too bad. And on these movie loops, you can see the clouds go by. these channels can't see through clouds. The lesson is there's no one perfect solution. You got to have the visible, you got to have some of that infrared single 3.7 channel, some of the infrared mixing to help get a different perspective. Another one, we've talked before about a fun channel called the day-night band.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and in Alaska in the winter, it's great. We got all this darkness. The day-night band is so sensitive to seeing light. You can see features that otherwise aren't available. Now in Alaska, when you have a forest fire, it tends to be light out all the time. It's our summer. But we can go down south to the Rim Fire in California in 2013. Now, okay, it was in California, not Alaska, but Alaskan crews went down to fight that fire, so we can talk about it here on Alaska Weather. Here we have a 3.7 micron channel shot of the Rim Fire, again, kind of a horseshoe shape, showing that active fire front down there. And then we'll look again to the day-night band, the visible light, and then you can see how the fire is all bright. You can see the active fire front and actually the city lights over there too. Turns out that the cities, while they're active in a social sense, are not really hot in a fire sense. So they don't show up in the 3.7 micron. They're not hot like a fire is, but the fire in the cities look the same from a visible light perspective. And a fun thing here too is that we can see the smoke plume going north from the Rim Fire on the day-night band. So if we were ever to have, like in 2004 in Alaska, you get dark at night, we still had an active fire season that year. That was that really bad year. The day-night band didn't exist then, but if we had fires now in August, we could use it then. The lesson here is weather satellites, they offer many different wavelengths of light. Some are used for different purposes, and some of these we just looked at tonight are especially helpful here in Alaska to find and to track the behavior of these wildfires so the crews can go out there and do their jobs.
Sure. So a satellite toolbox for the firefighting crews and the fire weather forecasters, and it just underlines how important satellites are, especially for Alaska and our mission for the National Weather Service to protect life and property and also to enhance the national economy. So wonderful stuff there, Eric. And people can look at pictures like this anytime by going to gina.alaska.edu. You'll find images there all around Alaska at various times of the year, and not just about fire weather, but volcanic ash and smoke and anything else you want to check out. They're always beautiful pictures and always interesting to look at no matter what time of the day. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it and welcome you back anytime. For this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. See you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's take a look now at the sea ice edge as we begin our marine weather segment. Ice is extensive throughout areas of the Arctic coastline down through the Chukchi Sea. However, notice here around Kaktovik and back toward the Canadian Arctic coast, there are some polynyas that have opened up with some brisker flow that has been across this area. Further south, some polynyas are located on the east and south side of Norton Sound. And then as we get down along the southwest coast, especially in through Bristol Bay, this ice edge here is pushing a little further south because we have north-northwest winds that'll continue at least into Sunday. And as a result, these areas may see the ice shift yet a little further south, but we're not expecting too much of an advance southward. Looking at the Panhandle on Saturday, approaching low pressure and occluded front will cause southeast to east gale force winds to 35 knots. Waves could build as high as 20 feet west of Sitka and Craig. The inner channels, winds out of the north, especially through Lynn Canal with gusts of 40 knots, but on the south end from out of Dixon Entrance, 40 knots. Southerly winds with waves as high as 13 feet. By Sunday, south winds as the front lifts up in through the Panhandle and certainly along the outer coast. South winds 25 to 30 knots, waves 5 to 9 feet. Up toward Lynn Canal, winds still keep a northerly component at 20 knots with 4-foot waves, but we do see winds could gust as high as 45 knots here west of Craig, south of Sitka. Waves along the outer coast within the nearshore waters, that's within 15 nautical miles. We're generally looking at 13 to as high as 17, 18-foot waves off of Sitka southward to off of Craig. And then for the northwestern Gulf, the most notable thing is that we're going to have west-northwest winds out of Cook Inlet, 45 35 knots with waves 12, 13 feet there. Northeast winds, Prince William Sound, waves 3 feet. In the north end of Cook Inlet, north winds 15 knots with waves around 3 feet. On Sunday, northwest outflow winds coming there out of the entrance of Cook Inlet, upwards to 50-knot storm force winds with waves of 12 to 14 feet. Northeast winds 20 knots continue in Prince William Sound with waves of 4 feet, and north winds up there, especially west of Turnagain Arm, we expect north winds 15 knots, waves 3 feet. Across Kodiak Island on Saturday, northwest winds 30 to 40 knots, highest there through Shelikof Strait, waves 10 feet. Winds could gust as high as 55 knots through some of the gaps here near and east of Chicknick, with waves 5 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side and generally 7 to 10 feet on the Bering side. For Sunday, winds continue northwesterly, not quite as strong, but 35 to 40 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, with waves 8 to 10 feet there. Winds could still be upwards of 45 knots here east of Chicknick, with waves of 9 feet on the Bering side. Waves generally running 6 feet, with winds out of the northwest around 20-25 knots. For the eastern Aleutians on Saturday, north to northwest winds 20 to as high as 30 knots there toward Dutch Harbor. Waves generally 6 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side, 9 to 10 feet on the Bering side. Winds variable through the central Aleutians, flipping around to the south-southwest, 25 to 30 knots. And then by Sunday, winds across a broad area of the Aleutians will be south to southwest, 20 to 25 knots here through the eastern and central Aleutians, and 25 to 30 knots, especially from Adak westward out through Kiska and Shimia. Waves anywhere from 5 to 7 feet surrounding the eastern Aleutians, but building back upwards of over 10 feet once you get west of Adak. And along the southwest coast, we have plenty of ice. West winds in the Norton Sound, 15 knots. Northwest winds, 25 knots there near Bristol Bay. So this ice could still advance a little further south there around Newingham Point. And areas out there towards St. Paul, St. George, west winds 30 knots, waves 9 feet. And then by Sunday, we're looking at west winds 10 to 15 knots, Norton Sound down through the lower Yukon Delta, northwest 15 to 20 knots there at Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays. And then along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the south-southwest, 10 to 15 knots as we drop through the lower Chukchi Sea, 15 to 20 knot westerly winds passing through the Bering Strait. And during the day Sunday, we expect east to northeast winds along the Arctic coast all the way down through Cape Lisburne and Point Ley at 15 to 20 knots with ice in place. Easterly through the lower Chukchi Sea at 10 knots and then turning westerly anywhere around 10 knots there, especially north side of St. Lawrence.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.